Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May Washington Square West Civic Association Board meeting. We have multiple speakers tonight, so we are going to really breeze through our things and get right into our speakers. I first, though, want to make two announcements. The first announcement is the board has voted on a new board member. And so I want to welcome Barbara to the board. Barbara, I do not want to mess up the pronunciation of your last name. So if you can, are you there, Barbara? I see you on, but you're muted. All right, when Barbara comes on, we'll have a quick conversation with Barbara. But I want to welcome Barbara onto the board. We're very excited to have her on board. She currently sits on the committee with Peter, which is the Trash and Cleaning Committee. So we just want to welcome her on. We're very excited moving forward. So that's my first announcement. My second announcement is that there is going to be a town hall tomorrow night at McCall Middle School. Katie already posted it on our social media. There's no way I can get this up on the website. So if anyone needs to see that flyer, it's going to be at McCall Middle School from 6 to 8 tomorrow night, Wednesday, the 15th. So everyone and anyone is welcome. She's going to be, from what I'm being told, she's going to be talking about safety, clean, and green. Casey, do you know anything about it?
I know everything about it, Tammy. I've been to 4 of them.
Go ahead, Casey.
I mean, it's going to be a 2-hour long lesson on the city budget, and also the mayor outlining her priorities around 5 different areas. It's public safety, clean and green, housing, education, and economic opportunity. And then she takes written questions at the end. So it's a great opportunity to learn more about the kind of inner workings of the city budget, as well as this mayor's specific priorities for her administration. And there's also like a bunch of resource vendor tables from city agencies. So if folks are interested in things like sweep officers, for instance, I know this group is interested in that. There are a lot of kind of municipal agencies that will be tabling. So I'd encourage folks to get there around 5:30, 5:45 if you really want to make sure you get a seat. Every other one of them has been completely packed and standing room only. So I would expect this one would be more of the same. So encourage folks if they want to come to get there early.
Thank you, Casey.
Can I just make a note about social media? All our social media posts, our Instagram posts also post to the website, just at the bottom of the homepage, washwestcivic.org. So if you're not a social media user, but you still want to get those like updates, go to our website and just go right to the bottom of the main page and they should all be there.
Thank you, Katie. Drew would normally do the minutes, but he is not at this meeting. So we will review and approve them offline. Bob, did you have anything for Treasury before we get into our first speaker?
I do not.
Okay, great. All right, we're getting right into it. So our first speaker tonight is Tyrell Brown. He is the executive director at Galilei, as well as he produces Pride 365. So he's going to talk about Pride in the Neighborhood, which is on June 2nd, and go through everything that is going to be happening that day here in our neighborhood. Tyrell, are you there?
I am. Hi, Tammy.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Almost Wednesday, almost home day. So first, greetings, everybody. I'm Tyrell Brown, as Tammy said, they, them pronouns. I am the president of Philly Pride 365. And this year's Pride is actually themed and called Be You, partially as an ode to my mom for Mother's Day, because she wanted me, I think, always to be authentically myself, because she knew that I would be unstoppable if that was the case. So I appropriately turned this Pride this year Be You. So I'm going to walk through the maps, but before that, I do want to kind of give some updates of about the weekend events, because there's a lot of moving parts to this weekend and layers that we added in, starting on Friday, then Saturday, and then of course Sunday for the March and Festival. Starting on Friday, we will have Pride around the city. We've already selected different locations around the city that we will be displaying our now 400-foot Pride flag, starting at the Art Museum in the morning for their flag raising at 9 a.m. on the Art Museum steps. And then after that, going to City Hall as well. We will also be in West Philly at Clark Park. We'll be hopefully in Chinatown. They haven't really confirmed yet, so we're waiting on a confirmation for that under the Welcome Arch. We'll also be in North Philadelphia and Fairhill at Taller Puertorriqueño. And then also we'll be coming down into the neighborhood, at least that is the plan right now, to Locust Street to do a display there. And these are just photo opportunities along and in conjunction with Visit Philadelphia. So we're excited about that portion on Friday. We also have that evening on Friday, another event that we're co-creating at the Franklin Institute that is a Science Pride After Dark. So we're excited about that one too. That's a 21+ event, but there's a show happening. So if you all would like to engage in that one anyway, you need something to do on that evening, feel free to hit up our socials or look at our website and see what's going on. And then on Saturday, right now we're in talks to do something pretty awesome and record breaking, but we're waiting to hear back if we get the clearance from Guinness Book. So I'll get Tammy details about that as soon as we get confirmation. That would not be in the neighborhood, that would be down at Independence Mall. So we're waiting to hear back about that. So hopefully we get the clearance and something really awesome comes to Philadelphia for that. So then after that, that's in the morning, that would be probably around 10 o'clock. Then after that, we have at the Franklin Institute again, a youth and family event that is running from 12 until 4. And then in the evening, we have our opening night event at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is, we're calling it appropriately the Pride Promenade. So this is an adult prom, 21+ for all of those of us who are queer, trans, or allies and didn't really get the opportunity to enjoy our prom years. So, you know, their tickets are sale in conjunction with the Art Museum. The benefits of those tickets actually go to produce a youth prom, a youth queer prom at the Art Museum that will be a homecoming dance in September. So those are the things that are happening outside of the big stuff happening on Sunday. We have on Sunday, beginning at about 5 in the morning is when I get started. So that's just to set up all of the porta potties, infrastructure, staging, and things like that. The festival then will start at 12 o'clock. The march, just the same as last year, will start at 6th and Walnut and follow the same route into the neighborhood. The city found that route worked really well last year. It was a shortened route because we did want some of our elders to be involved and to be able to walk and for it to be accommodating to them, as well as people living with disabilities. So it's a shorter route, but everyone gets to participate at whatever level they deem sufficient for themselves. So that arrives in the neighborhood. We're hoping at 12, but we're always late. And when I say we, I mean everyone. So we'll be arriving in the neighborhood probably around noon, if not 12:30, somewhere around there, coming down Locust Street. I'm going to bring up the first map. So the first map has the bike rack placement, and that is really just kind of the barriers. And to keep in mind, we've integrated a different way of creating barriers in the neighborhood this year. Last year it was just bike racking, but this year we're doing it in conjunction with some of our porta potties. So when I show you this, imagine that at some of these locations for the bike racking, that there would also be porta potties located there. And then the next map I will bring up has specific areas of where there will be porta potties or porta johns. So give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see that? Thumbs up.
Yep.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, cool. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to open this up. And I will get you, Tammy, over a copy of this too, so that everyone can have a look at it. It'll be available on our socials and stuff like that too as well.
Thank you.
So this is the, of course, this is the map for the bike racking, right? And again, like I said, just imagine that at some of these locations, there will be porta johns as well. So the red lines right here, those are all bike racking or areas that are sort of cordoned off with soft entry. I'll walk you through the different sections, which are pretty similar to last year. We did move some things around. We did also expand the festival ground because adding about 40,000 people to a festival makes it so that you can't really accommodate everyone on the few blocks that we were already using. So we did want to spread it out a little bit. So first, I'll point to the spread out area. So we did get clearance to take Pine Street. We do not have listed on here Camac Street because that is actually, we wanted to keep that section cordoned off for residents that were going to be still there. We did get clearance to do that as well. But we have vendors right here on Pine Street between 12th and 13th. And these are just tabling vendors that are selling any sort of goods, services, or what have you. Food trucks are also still where they were last year, stretching from Pine Street on 13th up to Locust Street with a little gap right there in the intersection. We also have vendors also now going down from Spruce Street to Pine Street right here on 12th Street. And then there is a small stage right here for Bailar Conamore that will be in this intersection. We're producing that in conjunction this year with Mixto, which is really exciting because Mixto has been sort of a staple in the neighborhood for a long time, but hasn't really been tied in. As you see, there's also bike racking, so we do not have anything going north of here. The permanent streets that we have are from right here on Juniper down here to right here on Quince. One of the reasons why we wanted to do that intentionally as well is because the city doesn't clean streets the day of the festival unless we have it permitted. So they will just leave it, even if it's like clean it up, they'll just leave it because we don't have the streets permitted. So now that we have sort of the whole area, the streets department will be there and the sanitation department will be there to clean up after the event on all the streets that we have permitted here. We do have the street right here permitted for Camac, but we just don't have it listed because we don't have anything infrastructure-wise, tabling or resources on that street. Right here we have our sober zone, which is our sober initiative. This year we're partnering with this group called the Phoenix, which is a sober activity group, they're really amazing people. So I'm excited about that. Our youth and family zone is where it was last year, right in front of William Way. There is a soft entry right now that we have going into William Way. So we wanted to have a space where people could engage with youth and family tabling, but also a specific space where you would have to go in and youth and family can be in there, be safe. And there's not like adults jumping around in bounce houses with like 5-year-olds, right? And also so that way we could cordon those areas off for alcoholic beverages or smoking or anything like that people would be doing around the rest of the festival where there's other adults. We do have right here a little place where there is a place to sit down and eat. That's this little purple section right there, right off of the food truck way. Our stage, the big stage is back in the parking lot. It worked really well right there. The parking lot has been really awesome with us. As long as we clean up after ourselves. We have Kiki Alley. This year we also have a Sapphic space, a Women Love Living space that we're partnering we're waiting to hear back from Voyer, but they will have a small stage right there. I did talk to also already to Marissa because she had concerns about the T shape right here and if people are going to go all the way down there, but that's not what we anticipate doing. It's really just Camac Street, but we're mapping it off there in color so that way everyone knows that that's sort of the entire area. But we anticipate putting some barriers right here for a soft entry, and there will be bathrooms again back there with the barriers as well. Right here we have our Stonewall Sports Zone, which is a new zone here. These are like interactive activities for grown-ups, because we want grown-ups to do other fun stuff there, except for, you know, just hanging out and drinking. So we also have our decompression zone, which is back right here on the small street, right by the garden. Didn't really stretch last year too far into where the houses were, but the neighbors right there were really gracious and helped support that initiative. So we anticipate doing that again. And then if you look, there's another stage right here. It's actually not that far up because that's actually where the building is, the new building right there, who's also sponsoring this year. So we're really excited about to have them in. But this stage right here will be with DJ Robert Drake from XPN and also Carl Michaels, and there'll be sort of pop-up performances right there throughout the day. A few other details before I pull up the map with the actual specific locations of where we have bathrooms. We did stagger the breakdown of this festival this year. So we have the permits from 8 till 8 o'clock, with the festival ending at 7 o'clock. But this year we have a headliner. And also what we recognized last year is that the festival was so massive and there were so many people there that most of our vendors, at least the ones that were selling t-shirts or giving away resources and things like that, they usually ran out of things at like 4 o'clock. I had people coming up to me at like 4 o'clock going, you know, can we just fold up our table and tent? So this year, to kind of accommodate for that, we're actually shutting down vendoring at 5 o'clock. So that is anything south of Spruce Street. So, or I should say Spruce Street and south, right? So all of the things here, youth and family zone will be closed at 5 o'clock. Pop Wellness will be breaking down at 5 o'clock. The vendors right here on 12th between Spruce and Pine will be breaking down at 5 o'clock. These food trucks breaking down at 5 o'clock, Sober Zone, the vendors down here, and also the Bylar Cornwall stage. So all of that stuff, essentially half of the festival will be breaking down at 5 o'clock. Then we will fence this off at 5 so people can get through, obviously, so they can get to their homes or head south if they're traveling south out of there. But it'll essentially be lights out on half of the festival with the rest of the events and things going on north right here. We have a headliner this year. On our main stage, it's Sophia Christel, of course. She's earned so much of our adoration, so we are bringing her home to be our headliner. So she'll be able to close out with a big closeout so people will know now it's time to go. But essentially everything from here north will be still in operation until the end of the festival at 7 o'clock. And then thereafter with any sort of cleanup. I'm going to bring up the next map that shows where the porta potties are. And then I'll open it up for questions as well. Give me 1 second. There we go. Can everyone see this one too?
Yes.
Yay?
Yeah.
Nay?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So these little blue squares, don't imagine them being one bathroom. So we've gotten 50 bathrooms. So that is, we have 20 bathrooms that are accessible, and then 30 bathrooms that are just regular porta-johns. And we have 1 hand washing station for every 4 porta-johns. So these locations where these little blue squares are where there are porta-johns stationed. Few things to consider here. Number one, These are where they're stationed strategically for the purposes of this map, but they may be moved to locations such as right here to where the intersection is, so that way we can support Dirty Franks, who's also sponsoring this year too. So we want to make sure that they have adequate bathroom support. One of the things that they mentioned last year, and a couple of establishments mentioned last year, were that their sewage systems were overwhelmed, right? Because so many people were coming in to use the bathroom. So we will slide them down there to those areas the day of, because they're really light. They're not really heavy to move. They just slide across the asphalt. But this is where they will be stationed when they're dropped off. And then some of these villages will live there throughout the year. Jeremy, and then also Colin were really intentional about selecting spaces so that they weren't where people's homes were, right? I think that was a big thing last year. So right now, where they're stationed, it's not where they're necessarily going to live the day of festival, but we will be moving them only if they're going to be like in the middle of a street clustered or something like that. So we won't be moving them up onto the sidewalks or anything. Partially, number one, it's because it's an accessibility issue too. People can't wheel their chairs up onto the sidewalk if they need to use the bathroom. So they will be not up on the sidewalk. But there is a small village right here. Also, I think there's probably 4 per section here, if I break it down. What we're attempting to do is also use them as barriers too, as well, as I was saying. So they're in conjunction with bike racking in some of these areas. So that way people don't want to go through a certain area. We don't have any infrastructure or things here. And we don't want people walking into the youth and family zone because it's a place where there is no drinking or smoking. So we have that area cordoned off right there. And there's a big barrier that's going to be there right now with porta potties for people to use, stretching right across here. We also have porta potties right here inside of the parking lot where the staging is. And then over here in the alley right here on St. James in front of Voyer, even though we're talking with them right now about them being open for bathroom usage as well for right there. We have a porta potty right here where the garden is for the decompression zone. And then we have porta potties down here where the food trucks are. And those, like, again, I said, we will probably shift some of those around the day of or the morning of the festival, probably around 5 o'clock. If you look out your window, you'll see me with a walkie on pushing a porta potty down the street. But yeah, so that's pretty much the long and short of the festival. Like I said, last year was really successful and I guess in attendance. There were, of course, things that we needed to button up and get better at, but we're improving every year. So we anticipate that we'll not only have more people if the weather holds up, but also that it will be improved from last year as well. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions or Tammy, if that's a portion that you want here, I don't know.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. And we can call on you. I just want to confirm what you were saying, Tyrell, about half the festival closing down. So you're saying Locust Street is not closing down, but Spruce and south of Spruce, it will all be closed down.
Yes.
Or
So
opened up, I mean, you'll open those areas up?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what we talk with the city about is that for all intents and purposes, not at 5 o'clock on the dot, right? So people will still have time to break down and put their tents away and what have you, and then still will have to come and get their belongings and drive off the festival ground. But we're anticipating that by 6 o'clock, these streets will all be open right here. Like people will be able to drive through. Also, another piece to this is that where the youth and family zone is, I'll share my screen again. So that way you all can see what I'm talking about. So this portion right here where the youth and family zone is, can everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So as you see, it kind of juts up closer to Broad Street. And the reason why we did that is because the stage last year was in the middle of the intersection and it's hot. So we didn't want like children baking in the middle of the sun, you know, when we're having our youth and family drag show. So we put the stage a little bit further up here. But what we did is that the way that we bike racked it off right here is that people will be able to walk down the sidewalk and around and down Juniper, right? So people can get through and around easier. Last year, it was sort of just like folded off and you just couldn't get through at all. And you kind of had to move the fence for people to come through each time. But this year, you can actually come through right there. It's that you just can't come right straight through and go down Spruce Street all the way to 13th right there, but you can go around and go down through Soper Zone right here and cut right back up. And the reason why we do that obviously is because there's children right there and we want to make sure that they are, you know, safe and secure throughout the entire day or the entirety of that day. And also the other part of it is youth usually tend to burn out at a certain period of time. So I know when I was teaching, like kids are kaput at like 4 o'clock. You're like, they've had a full day. It's in the hot sun. They've jumped around. They filled themselves with ice cream, and now it's time to go to bed. So, youth. That's why with youth and family buttoning up at that point was kind of the inflection point for the rest of the festival too. Down there, they run out of resources. There's no more giveaways. Last year, I think I walked past like Courage Medicine, and they were like, "We don't have anything to give out." They actually ran out of MPOC shots. They ran out of like everything and they were like, we just have bottled water. And I was like, that's great, but we actually don't need it because we have bottled water too. So, so yeah, that's pretty much it.
Katie, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question that I was unclear last year. Do all cars parked on all these event streets need to move? I assume so.
Yeah. So what's going to happen, and we did this last year, is that we got the signs that got put up by the city of like no parking or to move their vehicles. We also did this thing where we printed out these like cards for people that are parked right there that are like residents on the block. Because if you look, there are some dead zones here still. Like there's places where like we have the permits for this part on Spruce Street from 12th to 11th. We just don't have anything there. Like we don't have any infrastructure or tabling or anything like that planned to be there yet. So like, you know, there's dead zones right here that people would be able to kind of pull their car up and park there for the day, you know, provided that there's space. So yeah, that's sort of what like we did last year, is to give them like this placard and it's like just move your car around or to pull it out of this area and like, you know, prioritize you coming back to get that parking spot or what have you. So we anticipate doing that again as well.
Jill, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Terrell.
Hi, John.
I have a particular interest in the block, the 12th Street between Pine and Spruce, because of course I live on 12th Street between Pine and Spruce. And I do appreciate that the vendors are going to be leaving around 5, which would be great. Can you tell me a little bit about how the cleanup will work and when that will happen and who's responsible for that?
So yes, the city of Philadelphia is responsible for that. So we pay city services for them to do it. The first year that we did last year, like we were like, let's contract this smaller company. And that person, even though I love them to death, and they're like one of my very best good friends, actually their cleaning company is in my office right now because they clean my office. They weren't able to expand their bandwidth in time for the event. And we also didn't anticipate that there was going to be that many people there.
Right.
I think I wrote in the permits that there was going to be 40,000 and there was like 65,000. So, so that's why we moved to National Coming Out Day when we did that, to let's just pay for the city services to do it. And they will come through with their blowers and everything like that. But I
Jill,
don't
what time will they come
Yeah,
through?
that was what
I
was-
don't know. So I know they come before the event and then they come after the event. What I anticipate that they will do is after we clear out all the infrastructure right there, I'm anticipating that probably around 10 o'clock, they'll be sweeping through
Okay.
on these sections right here, because that's when we can assure like, oh, we have everything off that part of the festival ground. It could be earlier. It could be like 8 o'clock. I don't really know. I would have to reach out to OIT. We have a walkthrough tomorrow afternoon to determine like what that's going to look like at what time. And then they also do, though, even after they do that, they do come back the next morning as well. So like they come back the next morning with the actual street sweepers, and they come through and do the rest of the trash bins. They have to unwrap the big bellies and all of those other things too. So there is sort of several rounds that they do to like finish up what they're doing. And just keep in mind also, last year, Jill, we didn't have the street right there. Like we
I
didn't have the
remember.
permits.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like anything that like the guests up here were like, oh, like we're just walking down the street and toss. Like the city, even when they came through, might have done the rest of these blocks. I think the
Mhm.
next day when I came down the street, like I went to go get breakfast because we still have to do tons of work on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday,
Right.
Thursday. Like my
Right.
my Pride event doesn't end until like my butt is sitting in sand, and that's probably not going to be until the following week. But like the if you walked down these streets up here, it was like Pride never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you walk down here or down here, there was like bottles here, there, everywhere. So this year, since we have the permits for that, they will be sweeping the entire area, including like Spruce Street right here, including this area right here on Locust. So they'll be going through the entirety of the area that we have permitted.
Okay. And can you promise that we won't have porta potties on our street?
Mhm.
Okay. I'm going to hold you to that, Terrell.
I promise, I
Okay.
promise, I
Okay.
promise. The only, like I said, the only like the places that we have them located on here, the only way that they would be on your street specifically would be is if they were in the street, right? So they're not going to be up against someone's house or on the sidewalk or what have you. It would literally only be in support of whatever restaurant or bar, and you don't have any of
But
that
with
right.
vendors, okay.
Right,
Okay.
right.
All right. Thank you.
Of course.
All right. Any other questions for Terrell? Because we need to keep moving here. All right, Terrell, it looks like that's it. So thank you so much. And if you can send me a reminder about the walkthrough tomorrow, that would be great.
Yes, I'll add it to your calendar.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Welcome. See you, everyone.
Bye. Okay, moving forward, we are moving right into, we're going to talk briefly about the historic district designation. I have Paul Stanky from the Historical Alliance here, as well as Laura D. Pasquale, who is from the Historical Commission. The way we're going to work this, and I just want everyone to understand and know that the Historical Commission will be hosting two public meetings that will cover in more detail than what we're going to talk about tonight about the historic designation. So those two public meetings are meetings that everyone should be attending who have more questions in regards to the designation. So tonight, the way we're going to work this is we actually, the Civic have a few questions that we are going to pose first to both Laura and Paul. And then we'll then open it up for a few questions from the community. But again, I urge the community to attend these public meetings that will be coming up. Laura, can you give the exact, do we have the dates yet for those meetings?
Yes, May 22nd and June 14th.
May 22nd and June 14th. And are they by Zoom or
They're by Zoom. Yep.
they are by Zoom? Okay. Did you send that to me?
I don't know. I certainly can. if
Can you send it
if
to
you
me
don't
and
have it
then
already, yeah.
we'll post it everywhere so everyone will know what's going on. Bob,
And I also-
go ahead. Laura, go ahead.
There's a second historical commission staff member here as well, Heather Hendrickson.
Oh,
Hi, Heather
hi,
Hendrickson.
Heather. Okay, great. So Bob is actually going to start with these questions. And then when people in the community have a question, it would be great if you could post it in the chat. It'll be much easier to deal with moving forward. So, all right, let's go so that we don't waste too much time. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, so the questions that I have were ones that I've heard generally from community members, and that seem to be general questions. I'm sure you've heard them all before, but our members haven't. So when we read the review that was submitted, it has different classifications: significant, contributing, and non-contributing. Could you briefly explain what that means and how that affects the level of review?
Sure. So contributing properties are going to be the majority of the properties in the district. They're the ones that kind of create the feel and overall character of the historic district. Significant properties are those that are kind of worthy of or are already individually designated. They might have, and be particularly high style or significant for their association with an important person or event in Philadelphia's history. And then non-contributing properties are those that do not kind of contribute to the character or the history of the district. And those are regulated at kind of a lesser level. The buildings could be demolished. That could be approved by our staff, but the new construction in their place would be reviewed by the historical commission. So the work to those properties, we're just reviewing for its impact to the district rather than to the building itself. Whereas with buildings that are contributing or significant, we'd be looking at the impact to the historic fabric of the building and to the district overall.
So in general, then, the more significant the building is, the higher the level of review that the commission would offer.
Exactly, yeah.
So following on that, what features in general come under the review? I understand it's not the interior. We can rule that out completely? That you don't review the interior unless it's specifically nominated?
Exactly, yes.
And
So
how does that
exterior.
affect like the back of your home versus the front of the home? Or is it all under the guidelines?
So there, oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Please, no.
So we would review any changes to the exterior, but those that are not in the public, that can be seen from the public right of way, would be reviewed at a lesser standard. Like, so, for example, landlocked backs, and backs that face service alleys, things like that.
So for example, if somebody wanted to put a patio door in, it might be approved more easily in the back of the house where it's not seen, as opposed to taking out the front of the house on the sidewalk.
Yes, exactly.
Can you briefly explain the process of review? Do you need an architect to present to you? Can I come to you as a homeowner and make my own presentation? And about how long might it take, or what type of information do I need to give you? I know there's a lot of questions in there, but there's a lot of questions that I've heard.
Sure.
What do I have to do to get this process started if I want to make a change to my home, or really anything, I guess?
Sure. We always recommend consulting with our staff early on in the process of any changes that you want to make. You certainly don't need an architect to initiate the process. You would probably need one for, if you were going to build an addition to your house or something like that. But window or door replacement, usually you'd be working with a contractor, masonry, same sort of thing. And you could work with us directly, or your contractor could. That's sort of up to the owner with what you're comfortable with. The level of documentation and the types of things that we would need to review depend on the scope. So we work within your scope and then can provide feedback on kind of what documentation we would need for that given scope.
So is there like an application online that that gets a homeowner started if they want to do something?
It would usually we would just have a standard building permit application. We also have a kind of a PHC approval documentation form, but you can get the process started with a simple email to preservation@phila.gov.
And the amount of time that that an approval can take would depend on what type of work is being proposed. So the staff has an approval authority that's outlined in our rules and regulations, which is online on our website. And about 95 of permit applications fall within the staff approval authority. But the 5%, normally larger projects, they would be above a staff approval authority and would have to go through 2 series of public meetings, first with an architectural committee and then with the historical commission. But that's a very small percentage of the applications that we get in.
So I guess, for example, like if we want to replace the windows on the house, is that going to take a public meeting and posting, or is that?
So that would depend. The staff has the approval to, the staff can approve certain windows, and that would depend on which property the windows were going on. If a property owner doesn't want to do those windows and they want to propose something else, then it would go to a higher level to be reviewed. So it would depend.
But we do always try to work with owners to
Yeah.
get to a yes and to get to something that you know.
I guess we'll stick on the windows a little longer because that's one of the things that I hear people talking about the most. Like when Jewelers Row, when there was a community meeting and windows was one of the biggest issues that I heard at that community meeting. So I think it's probably the same for Wash West. Like, are you allowed to put in insulated windows? I've heard you're required to have storm windows.
Nope. So yes, we can approve and do daily approve lots of applications for replacement windows with insulated glass. If the windows historically had kind of divided light windows, we can approve simulated divided light where you've got you know, an interior and exterior muntin, but it's the double paned glass with a little spacer bar between it. So visually from the outside, it would look like it's divided light, but it's insulated glass with 2 panes of glass.
So are you required? So you're not required to put in like a wooden window like was in your house
No.
100 years ago?
Yeah. Usually for front facades, we could approve either wood or aluminum clad windows with profiles that kind of replicate the historic appearance, but are modern windows.
So following on the windows that where you mentioned the modern windows and the aluminum clad, what about the color selection of the windows, since they would come pre-painted, presumably, if they're aluminum clad?
The Historical Commission chooses not to regulate the painting of wood and metal trim items. So things like windows, doors, shutters, cornices are owner's choice.
So like the wrought iron railing, if you leave it black, it's fine, but if you wanted to paint it a different color, is that pushing the limits? Like on your front stoop? I've
never actually been asked what color you can paint a wrought iron railing.
But the door, if you want it red or blue, that's entirely up to the homeowner.
Yeah.
What about like the cornice that I think you mentioned at the top of most of our homes?
Owner's choice. We do regulate the painting of masonry.
You do? Okay, that was the next question. But what about the brick? If you want to paint it, that would take an approval process?
It would. So generally speaking, you want to avoid painting brick if you can. It traps moisture. it's not great for masonry. It can cause a lot of problems down the line. It might be a quick fix, but it's almost never good to coat masonry. So that's kind of our biggest concern in terms of masonry coatings in general. When the masonry has already been painted and removing the paint would damage the underlying masonry, our staff can approve it being painted a color that kind of replicates the original material underneath. So that might be brick red, it might be kind of a limestone color or brownstone color. And that would be with a vapor permeable coating.
Following that, is the color of the mortar, is that something that's part of the review? I've heard different things like.
Yeah, so mortar color and more importantly, the mortar composition. So a mortar that has lime in it, that's going to be breathable and not just cement that is going to be the harder material. You want the mortar to be the sacrificial material that the moisture can escape through and not out your masonry and cause falling. So for mortar replacement or pointing, we would look at the color and texture and composition to replicate the original color. So that might vary. Some styles of buildings had kind of a red mortar, others were more of a beige. It depends.
So what I'm hearing is besides the aesthetic, the commission offers some technical advice or points the homeowner in a direction that would be considered appropriate material wise as well as stylistically.
Yeah.
So not too much more on here that I had on my list. So that kind of covered like repointing and repairing a brick wall. Does that cover like garden walls, like the just for example, the garden in the one garden has a brick wall that's falling down, like that's in the back of the house. Would that fall under guidelines? I guess does it depend if you can see it or not see it, or
It would
Yeah,
depend
you
if
know,
you can see it or not see it. Also, if it was an historical brick wall, or if it's, kind of a modern addition wall.
so I suppose that there's a fair amount of discretion. Is that the right word? Or like not everything's black and white is in terms of how reviews are done.
correct. It's a lot of project specific and building specific and material specific.
And to review work, we use the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. It's a really long name, but it's what the National Park Service uses. And within that, there is some discretion built in. But when we are looking at a project, we'll always go back to the standards and see if they abide by the standards, etc.
So while there's discretion, it's based on actual written standards that if
Yes.
somebody's dedicated enough, they could wade through. Okay.
So can I ask a question? So one of the, I have an old house, but it's not historically designated. When I needed to replace my windows, it cost me $1,200 a window. My neighbor, a couple doors down, has very similar windows, but he had to go through the historic process because he is designated. $4,500 per window. Is the Historic Commission going to assist with people when the expenses run up like that? Are they going to offer anything? Or will they leave people with the option of just letting the windows deteriorate because they can't afford it? And because you guys, will be under your thumb.
Unfortunately, there aren't any financial incentives baked
So it's just
into
cost of homeowners.
Excuse me, Todd, I'm sorry. We're not really taking on questions yet from the public. Can you hang on for a moment, please?
Can I just ask one thing? Which
Yeah,
is this a done deal, or do we still have a voice? Is this just being pushed on us?
Well, actually, the one of the follow-up questions was going to be where are we in this process and how does it work? And Paul, if you want to jump in on that as well. So just to give people some background, this has been this has been a multi-year process that started, and somebody can correct me, well over 10 years ago. The application was submitted, but not acted on, and then needed some upgrade. We've
I can jump in there just to say, and I
Thank you,
know there
Paul.
are at least you're welcome, Bob. There are at least, and I'm Paul Steinke from the Preservation Alliance for Greater Philadelphia. I've never lived in Wash West, but I've been going there as a gay man since the mid 80s, before we used terms like LGBT and gayborhood. And I consider it almost my second home. I'm a native Philadelphian. But personal items aside, Bob is right. The first nomination for the Washington Square West Historic District was submitted as a sponsorship between the community and the Preservation Alliance in 2009. It got backed up behind some log jams in other parts of the city way back then. And then the Historical Commission basically stopped considering historic district nominations for a few years. That changed in 2017. The Historical Commission then, and Laura was there then, began to accept and review historic district nominations. Since that time, 2017, there have been 26 new historic districts enacted citywide, many times because communities actually approached us and/or the Historical Commission seeking them because they were dealing with development pressure that was costing them historic architecture and streetscapes. In Wash West itself, you look at the corner of 11th and Walnut, which would have been covered by the historic district if it had been enacted 15 years ago. That's where the Wendy's was. Nobody's crying over the Wendy's, but there are two buildings to the west of the Wendy's that are gone now, and there's an empty lot there with no indication when anything will ever get built, because that project seems to have stalled. And at least one of those two buildings was a community serving building with active retail and offices upstairs. I know the office of Cecil Baker was up there. They had to move. So that's the kind of development pressure that really has been driving communities into the Historical Commission's arms to take advantage of the protections offered by the city's historic preservation ordinance. And just a quick word on that. Philadelphia was one of the first cities in the country to have a preservation ordinance back in 1955. It was amended in the 80s to allow historic districts. The first one was actually West Diamond Street in North Philadelphia. It was a low-income neighborhood then. It's a low-income neighborhood now. But they were losing buildings left and right. And so the community banded together to create the very first local historic district in the city. As I said, since that time, we now have about 40 historic districts citywide, most of them enacted in the last 5 or 6 years, and most recently in neighborhoods like Powelton Village, Victorian Roxborough, Overbrook Farms, and central Germantown around Market Square, with more in the pipeline. And really what we say about historic preservation and historic district regulation is that it's a way for communities to manage change. It's not a way to stop change. It's not a way to freeze things in amber. It's a way to manage change, to make sure it's done thoughtfully and with respect to the architecture and history of the community. As I go around the city, I always say Philadelphia is the most historic city in the United States. And a lot of it's because we have 300 years of architecture, and Washington Square West is at the heart of that. The most important architects in America were designing buildings in your neighborhood from the early 19th century on. It's also the center of Black history in our city. It's where it all happened, really. And it's the center of LGBTQ plus history. It's where all that happened for our city. Your neighbors to the west, Rittenhouse-Fittler, have been a historic district since 1996. It's a thriving neighborhood today in 2024. I think we'd all agree. Your neighborhood to the east, Society Hill, has been a historic district since 1999. Old City since 2003. Washington Square West has been sort of the hole in the donut. and it has come at the cost of some of your historic fabric. Not just 11th and Walnut, but the old 12th Street Gym Complex, and other, changes that were not thoughtful and were not given any consideration except by a thoughtless property owner. And a lot of times what people say is, I don't want a historic district for me, but I would like to have it for my neighbors. I mean, think about that, because that's really, it's about stopping thoughtless, insensitive destruction and demolition of historic fabric. And so that's kind of where we are. And so this historic district nomination started to be thought about right before the pandemic. And the pandemic hit and nothing really moved forward. But as we were coming out of the pandemic, we, the Preservation Alliance, along with Wash West Civic, took a look at that 2009 nomination, and with a big assist from Historical Commission staff, including Laura, we were able to get it to the point where it's ready to be considered. So I don't know if I've convinced anybody, any of the skeptics, but 40 different neighborhoods are living with historic districts now, and many of them quite happily, because it put a stop to needless destruction of what makes those neighborhoods so appealing. So I'll stop there.
And Paul, just in the timeline, this was never submitted and then turned down and then resubmitted. This has been a linear process going forward.
Yeah, I mean,
to
it
dispel
was
some
submitted,
rumors.
it was submitted and then I think, as someone said, not acted upon in the years following 2009.
They're arguing in that chat. Oh, yeah. Oh.
So I'm sorry, but so the answer was then that 15 years ago, something was submitted and the community has no voice in whether it goes through or not now? Did I understand you correctly through all that?
The Historical Commission has not started its process yet in reviewing the nomination. So the first meeting that the Historical Commission will be reviewing is by its Advisory Committee on Historic Designation on May 22nd. That meeting, owners and members of the public are encouraged to attend and to participate in that discussion. That committee will offer a non-binding recommendation to the Historical Commission, which will meet on June 14th, also via Zoom, and the commission will make the final determination as to whether to designate or not.
The process. So then the process, though, if I understand it, is we are dictated to by the Historical Commission that the community itself does not have a say. It's the Historical Commission that will decide. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yes, the commission will be the entity.
So we as residents are powerless.
Not.
So we as residents are powerless in this situation.
Mr. Pittock, if I could just jump in and say, the process includes public comment, and the Historical Commission entertains any and all public comment at these meetings. You just have to sign on to the meeting and raise your hand, and you'll be given the floor.
And
I'm gonna get a more direct answer than that. I mean, anyone can say we'll listen to what you have to say, but more directly, the answer is that if the Historic Commission decides that it's a sort of authoritarian situation here, it's not a democratic situation. Is that fair?
No, it's not.
The city's
can I ask a question,
preservation,
please?
the city's preservation ordinance empowers the Historical Commission to make these decisions. It's democratic in the sense that it is a city ordinance that was passed in, I believe, 1984.
Laura, this might answer Todd's question, not necessarily in the way he wants, but just to understand how the process works. Anyone or any entity can nominate any property or any district without the owner's permission and complete on themselves. So, for example, if myself, Jonathan Bro, wrote a complete application to nominate Germantown, that would be receiving the same process that's going on right now, except the only difference would be, in some ways, would be lesser because I'm an individual. This community process wouldn't even necessarily need to be part of it. It would actually probably go right to the historic committee and commission for the most part. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Anyone can nominate, any person or entity can nominate a property or district. And then that nomination, once determined correct and complete, is reviewed at a series of public meetings and voted on at the conclusion of those reviews.
Which is what happened in 2009 or 2010. David, you're on, correct? David Richard?
But you're muted.
If David could speak real quickly, he was the original person who nominated Wash West for historic designation. And now I'm not sure what happened to David. But he was the original person who nominated Wash West.
Well, he was part of the committee of people of neighbors, and that he didn't do it himself.
Well, yes, I'm sorry. There was a group of people that did it. And the Civic Association at that time was not involved at all. Now that we're here and have been involved in this for 3 years, we have made it very public for those 3 years that this process has been going on. We have had public meetings. We also have spoken about it in multiple board meetings where the process was every time it was talked about. So it has been a pretty widely known process. And Lynn, I know you knew this is happening from the beginning, so you shaking your head is not going to make it any better.
Because Wash West only represents what, 400 or less people, and this is at least 1,100 properties. So there, to me, in all fairness, there's no excuse for why the city did not send mail outs on a regular basis, not Wash West, but the city, the commission, to the affected properties. You don't all of a sudden send a letter in March and say in June we're deciding, and oh, by the way, you better not do anything to your properties from now until then, or we can make you undo it. That's
not correct.
Well, that's the impression a lot of us got from that letter. And
Laura, can I ask a question following on Lynn's thing?
Mm-hmm.
So any property that exists right now that has historically inaccurate details, nothing's going to happen to them right now, and nothing can happen. No one's going to review properties. The Historic Commission does not have any authority to look at properties that are non-compliant at this moment. It would only be if the person tries to do work to their house or needs something that, they actually have to seek you out. Is that correct?
Correct. Any work that was done prior to kind of the notice letters that were sent out can remain until you choose.
That's not what I said. I said between the time we got the letter and the June 14th meeting. I did not say that other thing. I'm saying between that and the June 14th meeting, and what you're telling us is that June 14th, you can decide to historically designate all these properties. Is that correct?
Lynn, I think your issue is with the process, not with the people that are representing it. It's not. This is this is what was written by the city. The city ordinances that were passed designated the process. It's not the poor people sitting in front of us that are explaining the process to us tonight.
I don't understand what you're saying. But obviously from the comments coming on, the property owners should have been personally notified by the PUC or somebody in Philadelphia government. It really isn't the responsibility of Wash West Civic. I mean, they can have community meetings, but that is not the same thing as official hearings with the public. That's
we're at that process now. That's where those hearings are starting. There was no reason to have hearings until the nomination was submitted and accepted. There was The city had nothing to do with it. The city did not make this process. It was
Correct.
the neighborhood, the civic, the preservation alliances, community members. But until it was
Gonna
accepted,
take the action, the city's gonna take the action that's gonna affect our properties. So I mean, I think a lot of us would feel a lot more comfortable if June 14th isn't the date where the decision can be made, because then we've got 2 meetings where we can affect this decision for people who didn't, and even myself. I didn't understand when you were talking about historic district, I'm thinking, oh, good, they won't be tearing down some of these wonderful old buildings, you know, that they've been doing. I didn't know that that put me under the same restrictions as my neighbors, many of whom are historically designated. Because when my husband and I bought into this area in 2001, we went out of our way not to buy a historically designated building because we did not want to go through the hell we've seen a lot of our friends go through with the historic designations. So, you know, this is a really big deal, and you shouldn't, only one letter has gone out, one letter. And there should have been regular letters going out to the affected property owners.
I can't say I disagree with you, but that's not the process. I mean, this is the way the law is written. The Historical Commission is doing exactly what the law prescribes them
Well, the
to do.
Sunshine Act is also the law, and that says you're supposed to be consulting with the community in an official way, not just warm.
Then you need to take that up with city council and with Mark and legally. I mean, that's not, you're getting above where the Historic Commission is.
The
That's not
Historical
there.
Commission is obligated to provide 60 days notice to property owners, and we did provide that. You all are participating now in this meeting that is not an official meeting of the Historical Commission's process, which won't begin until May 22nd. We would not have been able to provide notice to owners prior to that time because we were ensuring that all of the addresses in the inventory that was submitted were OPA compliant, and that we had all of the correct addresses, that all of those could go to property owners. So that's part of our review process, is making sure that we are able to send notice to the correct addresses, and that all of the affected property owners will be notified. And we send duplicate notice. We send notice to the property itself, as well as to the property owner of record with the Office of Property Assessment, which may or may not always be as up to date as we would like.
I think the other big complaint also is the lack of information on the commission website. So nowhere on that website do you see that if you want to change the color of your brick, vapor, where the vapor goes through, right? That your only choice, if you want to change the color of your house, is red brick. So the 2 houses across the street, this gentleman, he wanted to change his color. It's kind of a putrid yellow, but he was only given the choice of red brick. That was it. That was it. And he didn't want that. So it stays a putrid yellow because the commission wouldn't let him change it. And just one story after the next. And this is the other thing, is that Philadelphia Historical Commission has meetings where they only allow public comment on whatever they put on the agenda. You would have heard a lot of more complaints about the commission and their policies had you not had that agenda items only restriction on public comments. And that's in violation of the Sunshine Act.
You're always welcome to
take that up
submit.
with Mark and city council.
But Richard, it's not, I mean, I don't think the issue I have here is that, so I've been here 10 years. I'm a member. I've been a member for most of that time.
Right.
I've not seen this discussion. The letter that I got was presented as a fait accompli. It was not an invitation for a conversation. My sense is that we're rushing to the conclusion here with that, right? Without open discussion. I think we're going to be humored at a meeting when everybody knows where this is going. And so I'm not, this is not directed personally at anybody here. I appreciate people who are here are sharing. But I'm concerned by this. And when I use the word authoritarian, what I mean is an agency has been authorized and the people, the democracy has been removed from the process. That's all.
Well, can I just jump in, and a couple of things that haven't been said that I think are important. One, I think Bob was trying to say it, that historic designation does not mean that you have to go back you're not forced to go back and make changes to your building, right? There's no retroactive changes that say you have to make your house look like it appeared in 1850. That's just not done. The second thing is the only time the Historical Commission gets involved is when you, as a property owner, are doing work that requires a building permit. Now, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but think to yourselves, there's the one resident I heard who's lived there since 2001. That's 23 years ago. How many times in 23 years have you gone to L&I and pulled a building permit? My guess is many of you have never done it even once. I see one gentleman has done it 3 times. I'd say that's well above average. If you don't need a building permit for the work you're seeking to do, then the Historical Commission doesn't get involved. Where they do get involved is when you go to L&I, or your contractor does, and L&I looks at the address and says, oh, this building is part of a historic district. You're going to have to take your proposal over to the commission. And as you just heard earlier from Heather, 95% of the applications are approved over the counter. I'm going to say it again. Think about that. 95% of the applications are approved over the counter. What shows up on the monthly Historical Commission agenda is a tiny, tiny fraction of building permit applications that go through the commission. Laura or Heather, how many building permit applications did the commission review roughly in 2023? Do you know that roughly?
I don't. I know on average we were reviewing around 2,300 prior to in years past, and I don't know the exact number for last year, but
right. So it's thousands, and to do the math, 95% are getting approved pretty much same day. So I think this is being, I think if people who don't have experience with historic districts and the Historical Commission have kind of a misconception of what it will mean for them. No building permit, no Historical Commission. Have a building permit, you have a 95% chance of getting SNAP approval. Is it really that much of a burden? I don't really see that it is. What it is a burden on is developers who buy these undesignated properties and bulldoze them with an over-the-counter permit. We all saw what happened on Jewelers Row. I see Katie Lowe is on the call. She was on the front lines with us and others fighting that. But we had no leverage. Everybody thought Jewelers Row would be there forever, but it wasn't designated, not most of it. And so we saw what happened there. That's in a growing city with a lot of development pressure, which this city has had for the past decade. This is really the one way that your neighborhood and neighborhoods like it have to control it. At the cost of what? Not that much, really, based on what I just said.
Paul, if I could jump in, because I think that there's an important piece that has been expressed that it seems the commission is missing. And that is, it appears that there is no process or set of standards that the commission is following in order to minimize the cost to residents. There is no process by which you are evaluating these criteria and specifications around windows such that you are actively working to minimize the cost impact to the residents in the neighborhood. And that's what has people kind of concerned. The window example that was presented earlier is a very real one. That is not something that requires a permit, but it could easily go from being a $1,000 window to a $5,000 window. And when you think about the cost burden that has, especially on fixed income individuals, that's problematic. Moreover, you only go and replace a window when you have a problem. And so the second piece that I think is being unaddressed is this understanding around process and the speed with which the commission is able to review these things. And I think that process and speed element is important, both from a resident perspective, but also from a new development perspective. And Paul, you mentioned the development on 11th and Locust. I think it's a perfect example.
Walnut, actually.
Okay, well, 11th and Locust, or I guess you're right, it is 11th and Walnut.
Yep.
The reason that project was is not being built is because it took too long to move that project through LNI. And so what ends up happening is developers do come to the city. We have a ton of regulation. We have a ton of different levels of approval, both through CDR and RCO. And that permitting process is actually a bit of a challenge to move through expeditiously. And what ended up happening with that particular project is the permitting and review process took so long as the interest rate environment changed. The institutional investors looking at that project basically backed out and said, we'll just wait. And I think there's a macro dynamic here that should at least be expressed, which is money is moving into cities to build them, to make them more sustainable, to make them more green, to increase affordable housing, to bring all of the social benefits that come with added density. And when we make it really, really difficult for that to happen, that NIMBYism actually has a negative consequence on the city. And now at that intersection, we walk by it every day and just have a gravel, lot with chain link fence wrapped around it. And it'll stay that way for the next several years until somebody else has the gumption to be able to come in and bite the bullet and work with the city to build again. And so that comes again back to this process element and understanding, and maybe this is something that can just be outlined in the meetings that you guys have up and coming in May and June, but understanding how that process will work in an objective way, because a lot of these things are subjective, which also triggers concern for individuals here. But it would be helpful to see that presented in a very clear format so that people understand what that process is. A good framework to potentially use is that of Old Town Alexandria in Washington, D.C., historic designation, but it's very, very clear as to what you need to do in order to comply with that, both for new builds and for renovations. They have a 500-page document of all the approved specifications that you are allowed to use. Therefore, as long as you do that, you just move straight through the process, you get a stamp of approval, and it happens in a couple of days. I'm not hearing that we have that level of rigor within the process or clarity. And I think that the lack of clarity is triggering a lot of this concern, particularly as it relates to those two elements of cost and speed.
Well, I will say about the 11th and Walnut project, everything you said may very well be true, but let's be honest, the Historical Commission had nothing to do with that. Whereas the project going up at 12th and Sansom, where that parking garage used to be, I think is about to open and have people moving in. And nobody cried over losing that parking garage, because if there had been a historic district there, it would have been non-contributing. So really, every situation is different. I think the 11th and Walnut project had issues with the Federal Aviation Administration because of the helicopters at Jefferson. That's not a city, that took some time to resolve. But my understanding is that wasn't a city issue. So that had some complicating factors. Although what you're saying, I'm not disputing. I'm just saying that the Historical Commission had nothing to do with that.
Point being, though, the adoption of the Historical Commission's requirement to review projects is not going to accelerate that timeline. The assumption is it will continue to delay it. And so projects like that will be made even less feasible. That was the point that I was trying to make.
So real quick, hold on, everybody, because Kathleen has had her hand up for a while now. Kathleen, you had a question? Kathleen Garris? No, she's not there now, I guess. All right, I'm sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
So just a couple of things. So I've worked with the Historical Commission and the Preservation Alliance numerous times. I've presented to them numerous times and have gotten projects through them numerous times. On historic houses, we've gotten roof decks, we've gotten balconies, I've painted them, I've done enlarged windows. And a lot of things that are stated that can't happen can happen. Every instance is unique, and it should be clear that there isn't an absolute rule. Also, with regards to development, it will not slow down development. If it's a significantly large project, there's enough time in the process and enough time in, the design and development of any project, that anyone who's knowledgeable of it, which would be any developer developing the city, can certainly work with the historical committee and commission to get that project done in a timeline that works with the general development timeline of the project. There is no delay there. I've also heard the statement that vacant lots now become a problem. And Laura, I have a question on that. So if a lot is vacant right now, and it wasn't vacant because a historic building was just torn down, but it's been vacant for a long time, what would the review of that be by the historical committee and commission? Is it really that significant, or is it something that, like, what do you look for there?
So there are a few things with vacant lots in this district as proposed. If a vacant lot is classified as non-contributing in the district inventory, new construction on that parcel would be limited to what is called review and comment jurisdiction, meaning that the project would need to be reviewed by the historical commission at a series of public meetings, the architectural committee, which is advisory, and then the historical commission, which is the full entity, appointed body. And
Laura, you're getting there's a lot of echo on you right now. So
Can
yeah,
you hear me?
yeah, there's a lot of echo on your end right now.
Can you hear me okay now?
It's a little better. Thank you.
I think if everyone on the call mutes, that might get rid of it, except for her.
All right. So if a property is non-contributing and is vacant, the review and comment jurisdiction, the commission can offer feedback on the design, but doesn't have plenary jurisdiction to deny or approve the project. If the property is classified as contributing, but it's a vacant lot, so for instance, there are 2 lots in the district as proposed that are classified as contributing for archaeological potential. So for those, there may need to be the commission may, excuse me, when reviewing the project, may ask for kind of a phase 1 archaeological assessment of the property for that review, and then would also review the new construction for its compatibility with the district at a series of public meetings.
Laura, we really can't understand a word you're saying.
Sorry.
Heather, are you able
Yeah.
to- Heather,
Yeah,
are you
I can
there?
try. I can try
Okay,
to.
you sound fine, Heather.
No, that's fine. So vacant lots, it would depend. If there is a vacant lot in a district that is categorized as non-contributing, then the historical commission would have review and comment. So it would go through the process of architectural committee and historical commission, and they would not have they would review and comment on the project. But if there is a vacant lot that is contributing, for example, for archaeological components, then the historical commission would be reviewing would have full jurisdiction over the project. But if the vacant lot is contributing because of archaeological potential, then before anything is constructed, there might need to be an archaeological investigation before putting anything on the vacant lot.
Thank you.
Is that right, Laura?
All right. It is 8:24. If there's anyone here that has another question, we can take that. But again, I am going to restate that the Historical Commission is going to be hosting 2 more public meetings, May 22nd and June, what was it again?
14th.
14th. Okay, so we will make sure that we get this information and get it out to everyone ASAP once we receive it. We will not be sending it out in a letter, everyone, just so you know. We're not going to send it out in a letter, but we will post it on our social media and it will go out on our e-posts as well. Katie?
Maybe a question I have, maybe for folks from the commission or Paul, because of the Jewelers Road debacle back several years ago. I think there was supposed to be, there was this mayor's preservation task force, and there was maybe going to be more incentive for folks to have historically designated properties, things like tax breaks and stuff like that. Did anything ever come of that? Is anything ever going to come of that? Like, is there hope that that might happen one day, as a way to financially assist people who have historic properties? Does anyone know?
Well, I will know, I know a little bit about it. So the 10-year tax abatement, which was removed for new construction, does still exist. Paul, I think you know this more than I do, for adaptive reuse projects. So that is that's correct, isn't that?
Yes, any building rehabilitation whatsoever, whether or not designated historic, is still eligible for the full 10-year tax abatement. New residential construction, that has been basically cut in half. And the other things that came out of the task force, since Laura is a little bit echoey and it may have been before Heather's time on the commission staff, are that zoning incentives were put in for adaptive reuse to speed the zoning approval process for historically designated properties. For example, a church that might be getting converted to apartments. They get automatic zoning for multifamily to encourage their adaptive reuse. They also get relief from parking requirements. So again, I'll use the example of a historic church. Usually they occupy their entire building lot. There's no room for a parking lot. Yet the zoning code would require that if it were converted to an apartment building. The change in the zoning that resulted from the Preservation Task Force gets rid of that requirement. And providing parking is a big development expense. So that's a big advantage for conversions. And finally, Mayor Kenny and his budgets year over year increased the staffing of the Historical Commission. At the time of the task force, which was 2017, 2018, there were about 5 full-time employees at the commission, and they're now up to 11. So they basically doubled in size in terms of staffing, which gives them more capacity to both review building permit applications, which have been much higher than they used to be because of the city's building boom. And that gets to the gentleman's point who was talking about 11th and Walnut. The commission has a requirement in their rules and regulations that they must review building permits in how many days is it?
60 if it's going to be reviewed by the Architectural Committee and Historical Commission, but 5 if it's Southall.
Right. So that was another enhancement that came out of the task force. The one thing that one of the things we're still pushing for is the creation of a city-sponsored fund to assist low and moderate income property owners in complying with historical commission mandates when they are a financial burden. So that is something that Mark Squilla is aware of and is willing to push, but it hasn't happened yet. He needs more of a push, I think. I'm also going to put in the chat a link to the nomination. I hope that's the right one. Actually, it may not be the right link. Let me find the right one. But in any event, if you haven't read it yet, whether or not you're in favor of the historic district proposal, I would just encourage you to read it, because as a homeowner and as someone who cares about their neighborhood and their city, I think it will make you proud. It will make you proud to learn some things about the neighborhood that you didn't know about, perhaps, and to understand why the Washington Square West neighborhood is considered so historically significant. So I do hope you'll take the time to at least read it, especially the statement of significance, which is section 7. That's the narrative version of why the district is considered worthy of historic designation. And
Can I throw one more question? I think back when we had our public meetings and there were a lot of conversation about the whole thing, the idea, do I remember that there was an idea about proposing like a historic district light? Is that a thing? Was that ever a thing? Am I misremembering?
so I think you're referring to what we also call as a tiered district. It has different regulations than the kind of historic district that's currently on the books. That has been a project of study by the Planning Commission and the Historical Commission for the past couple of years, but it has not yet ripened into legislation or into an amendment of the Historic Preservation Ordinance. It's still an aspirational idea. It's not real yet.
And I'll just jump in there with Paul mentioning the report. It's 40 pages of narratives, and then about over 1,000 or almost 1,400 pages where every single property in the district is individually listed with a picture and a description. So you can look up your home on there and see what it says about it, see what your significance is, contributing, non-contributing. There's a lot of information in there for people who want to look at it. And then I just want to add as treasurer that this was entirely funded by donations, so that if people are concerned about the civic spending dues money on it, I can tell you that all the money came from contributions specifically for the project. So that if you're opposed to it, while the civic undoubtedly sponsored it, if you were opposed to it, you didn't pay for it, if that makes anybody feel any better, just as an aside. And Tammy, I'll turn it back over to you to conclude.
So yes, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I want to thank our speakers, Paul, Heather, and Laura, as well as Tyrell. Again, we will be sending out more information in regards to these 2 other public meetings that the Historical Commission will be doing. So stay tuned for that. I need someone on the board to
Actually, Tammy,
yes,
there's
thank you.
other stuff. There's actually stuff we have to talk about. I have 4 projects coming to zoning in 2 weeks that I think people would like to know about.
Sorry, Jonathan, you didn't tell me you had zoning stuff, so.
May I be excused?
Paul,
Yes,
and Laura and Heather can
Paul,
certainly.
Laura, and Heather,
Have a
thank
good
you
evening.
very much.
Thanks,
I
everyone.
appreciate
Good
your
night.
time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'll keep it quick. Yeah, we haven't had a zoning meeting in a while, so we haven't had any cases. And lo and behold, we have 4 coming up in 2 weeks. And we will make sure that this goes out in our next e-post. I'm gonna try and share a window really quickly. All right, everyone see my screen here?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. All right, so first one is 1102 to 1148 Market Street. The application is for the installation of 2 statically illuminated accessory projecting signs, size and location to be shown in the plans. There are 2 refusals for this. One is for the prohibited signs. Projected signs are prohibited except on properties between fronting Market Street between Front and 5th. And the second one is sign controls that projecting signs shall not extend more than 24 inches over the public right of way, which is essentially a sidewalk. The next project is 1224 Walnut Street. This is for the erection of a 4th-story addition with retractable roof in an existing 4-story building for use as a takeout restaurant and sit-down restaurant in the same building. All other uses as previously approved. This is refusing a referral, which means the use is allowed, but they still need to present to the community. Is referral for the proposed use takeout restaurant requires a special exception. It should be noted that both the restaurant itself and the takeout part of the restaurant are actually two separate referrals that have been combined here. The next one is 722 Chestnut Street. I only have a partial refusal on this one, so I'm going to get I need to follow up with the applicant on this, but the appeal is they have a permit for a 2-family residence within this building with all other previously approved uses to remain. So essentially the ground floor will remain retail, and they're looking to have 2 residences above it. And then finally, keeping this quick, 735 Sansom. Application is for a 2-family household living on the 2nd and 3rd floors with an existing commercial use jewelry store on the ground floor. It is receiving a refusal because the proposed use of a 2-family household is prohibited in the CMX5 zoning district. So that's it. So thank you, Tammy. Sorry I didn't let you know that was coming.
No, no problem, no problem. So those will be at your zoning meeting.
Correct. 2 weeks from today, starting at 7 o'clock.
Okay, great, great. I do need to, Katie, did you want to mention what's happening next weekend, or no, the following weekend, the 25th? Go ahead.
Yes, not next weekend, but the following, not next weekend, but the following weekend. Washington Square West Civic Association 3rd annual community yard sale. That means clean out your closets, clean out your drawers, go find all that junk in the garage and sign up for our yard sale that will be happening on Saturday, May 25th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. officially. If you want to start earlier or stay late, that is completely up to you. So we already have a map going. If I'm real smart, I can put it in the chat when I'm done talking, and you can see who has already signed up to participate in the yard sale. So when you sign up, you pay a small fee, $5 for individuals, $10 for families. That helps us give a little money for the Civic to do some little fun stuff. And we will be making and printing some flyers to give to you to post on your door or window to let your neighbors know you are selling. We will also be doing the work for you of advertising this yard sale. You don't have to advertise it. We will put it on social media and Craigslist and try to get some people out to your sale. And rain date May 26th. Last year we got rained out, but it was a mess. So we're going to try to do better this year. Also the knitting group, Wash West Knits, which is actually not exclusively a knitting group, but a Fiberworks group, has changed the time, still on 3rd Tuesdays, but they're going to be from 12:30 to 2, and have also changed location. They're going to meet up at Yarn4Ya Yarn Store, which is on Pine Street. I believe it's 1020 Pine Street. So if you have some time and want to make some friends, some other people who are knitting, crocheting, cross-stitching, hand weaving, whatever you can think of, meet up with them. It is a little bit space limited. When we were at Starbucks before, it was a little more spacious. So if you'd like to join, send an email to, hey, new email. Okay, klow@washwestcivic.org, guys. New email if you want to RSVP to that. Andrew Jones is working on our new email addresses. And
wait, hold on a second. There's an issue with email right now. I have not been able to receive emails with my @WashWestCivic address, so it might be the same for you. So right now,
okay,
just not yet. Sorry.
Okay, then go back to washwestkatie@gmail.com. Yeah, do some stuff. That's it.
Thanks, Katie. Real quick, Casey wanted to let everyone know that there were trees planted on Earth Day. 4 were planted with 10 volunteers. There will be 6 trees ready to go this fall. Just so everybody knows that the tree planting is still moving on very well. Peter, did you have anything you wanted to talk about with your committee before we go? Peter, there's Peter.
Yeah. Thanks, Tammy. Just very briefly, I had a few more things, but the only urgent one really is that we are planning a walking tour with the sanitation department of the district in the first half of June. And the point of the walking tour is to identify or to highlight trash hotspots, not sort of passing ones that can easily be dealt with, but ones that sort of keep repeating on particular blocks around Wash West. So all I'm asking now is that anyone on the call who is concerned about a repetitive trash hotspot near them or that they're aware of in the district, could you let me know? And we will add it to our itinerary for the walking tour if we possibly can.
Thank you, Peter. I think that's everyone. I do want everyone to know that the beautification program that we've been working on for a few months now is finally kicking off. Lynn, the windows graphics are going to start happening in some parts of the city. The first one will be on Jefferson's property, right there where the sub shop was, whatever, Jimmy John's or whatever. Right now there's just blue stuff up in the windows that will have the history of Jefferson on it within the next couple months. So stay tuned for that. We're also connecting up with a couple different other organizations for that beautification program. So stay tuned on all of that.
I do just want to add that I do think that should be a zoning regulation, that windows should always have curtains or something in them to make them look nice. And they shouldn't have that brown paper blight that's not just in our neighborhood, but it's throughout the city.
Correct. We are actually, I am on a group right now, Lynn, for all the civics and organizations throughout the city who are trying to put that legislation together right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
A big
stay
thing.
tuned. Stay tuned. All right. Anyone else before I can adjourn this meeting? Are we good on the board? Everyone on the board? Anyone else have anything they need to say that I missed?
Jonathan just put his hand up.
No, I'm motioning to adjourn is what I'm raising my hand.
Okay. All right. So who seconds the motion? Peter seconds. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the May. Good night.